What if we woke up tomorrow and there was nothing? No phones, no computers, no digital technology whatsoever. Do you think we'd manage?
That's quite an eerie thought, John. Imagine doing our jobs without technology. As frightening as it seems, this scenario would inevitably result in drastic changes in our daily routines and the global economy.
I wouldn't even be able to code. And without digital connectivity, how the heck would we record this podcast?
Exactly. Imagine managing financial transactions without any digital support or even trying to run a business without the internet. It almost seems unimaginable in the modern age.
And with that, what about our educational system? E-learning would be non-existent, and schools would definitely take a big hit.
Same for the healthcare industry. Telemedicine and digital health records have played such a crucial role, especially during this pandemic.
So in a nutshell, we're talking about a complete shift in some key sectors. We'd be forced to revert to traditional methods across the board. What intrigue that would be.
Let's delve into the realm of businesses. With no technology, what happens to the corporate world?
See, John, without technology, we're looking at a major reset. Most global businesses today are tech-driven, and they'd feel this change hard.
And that might lead to the rebirth of traditional industries, yeah?
Interesting point, Bo. Industries that previously relied on manual labor might make a comeback. Picture a world dominated by manufacturing, agriculture, and craftsmen.
It could even level the playing field, with the shift to local services causing a resurgence of small businesses.
John, as someone working in finance, what would that mean for the corporate landscape?
Good point, Bo. It would disrupt business hierarchies. Corporations with a strong digital presence might struggle, while those that could adapt to manual operations might even thrive.
I'm thinking of the tech industry in particular. We wouldn't need coders or network engineers anymore, but we'd need a lot more service workers, farmers, and craftspeople. Suddenly, blue-collar jobs become vital again.
It would definitely lead to a societal shift, altering occupational hierarchies too. Quite fascinating.
And with a world moving more towards personal touch, maybe the jobs that require human interaction would be valued more.
But will this be enough to sustain global economies? Without tech, we're also losing a major contributor to the GDP.
The million-dollar question, Javier. The resurgence of traditional industries might fill this gap, but the transition would likely be rocky. But that's a topic for another day.
Imagine major global businesses needing horses and carriages for transport again.
The logistics would be a huge challenge. Overnight shipping, forget it.
Actually, that might make local businesses more competitive. If you can't get products from overseas within days, you'd turn to local providers.
I hadn't thought about that. So the global supply chain is dismantled, and we fall back on local products and services. That thrusts us back to small-town economies.
But how can these local businesses handle the high demand? It's not like we can get stuff from different parts of the world as easily as we do now.
Javier, this might be when traditional industries become powerful players. An economy without technology would definitely nurture their comeback.
The issue of high demand is valid. Local businesses, though capable of offering unique goods, might struggle to meet the increased demand.
That's a fair point, John. Let's not forget we're also talking about limited infrastructure to support these resurrected traditional industries.
Agreed, Javier. Plus, countries that are better prepared for manufacturing might take the lead. Perhaps we would see a resurfacing of manual labor-intensive businesses on a greater scale.
Will that be enough to power global economies? Considering the loss of tech jobs, is the prospect of the traditional industries' resurgence that promising?
The question isn't just whether they can power global economies, but how they can adapt to the severe logistical challenges presented by a tech-less world.
A world without technology, artisan shops and manual labor jobs re-emerging from the sidelines. Now that's a sight to see.
Thinking about it, there might be a sort of Renaissance era of craft making. Everything has to be handmade, right?
Isn't it possible, though? Considering how people adore artisanal goods, it might just fuel artisans to take center stage again.
That could be the silver lining. A boom in local businesses and a surge in demand for handmade goods. But, on another note, doesn't it also suggest that the workforce would need to dramatically shift?
You mean more people would need to learn or relearn manual labor skills?
Didn't we see a rise of robots and AI to replace human errors and efficiency gaps in manufacturing sector? If the tech is gone, wouldn't that impact those sectors?
That's a valid concern, John, and it doesn't stop there. The loss of technology also potentially means loss of certain skills and knowledge. People who thrived in the tech-driven economy might struggle to adapt to this new world order.
If the shift is that dramatic, it would be a total chaos. The job landscape would turn upside down.
Maybe, but think about this. With the rise of traditional industries, the skills required might also shift. It's possible that people would then value manual skill-related jobs again, like farming, carpentry, or even blacksmithing.
That's a really fascinating thought. Our concept of what's valuable, what we're willing to pay for, might completely change.
And with changing value, the business landscape would have to adapt as well. If everyone's buying power is focused on certain sectors, wouldn't demand dictate which businesses thrive and which don't?
It's really a survival of the fittest then? In a world without technology, old-world industries might have the upper hand, at least for a while.
So, what happens to financial transactions in an economy without technology? Won't we have to revert to physical currency?
That seems like the most logical step. Consider having to carry cash for everything again. No more swiping your card or making an online transfer. Everything needs to be transacted in person.
Imagine how huge a wallet we would need to carry for making big purchases. Buying a house would require a briefcase full of cash.
Javier, you make an interesting point there. Buying a house would probably require a truckload of cash. Aside from the inconvenience, wouldn't the reintroduction of physical currency also increase the risk of theft and the burden on cash management?
And not just that, the public safety issue could also increase significantly. But John, wouldn't people also resort to barter trade, especially for goods that are not worth much in terms of cash?
To think about it, laptops, smartphones, and other tech gadgets would be practically useless. Would they just become expensive paperweights?
Quite possibly, yes. Without the internet or other digital technology, their functionality is significantly reduced. So, essentially, barter trade could see a massive comeback. You're right, Bo. With a potential rise in the use of barter trade, it could further complicate transactions.
But what would be the most valuable item in a barter system? Could it be something like gold or other precious metals?
It's hard to say. I would think things with a practical use might hold more value, like physical assets such as land, livestock, or crops. Precious metals could indeed play a big role given their historical significance as a store of value.
There you go. All gold enthusiasts would finally have their day.
That's a concerning thought. The stress on global financial stability is enormous if technology departs from the picture.
I'm just picturing those old Western films with bank robberies. Sounds chaotic, right?
Yeah, it'd definitely jimmy some nerves. But John, what about auditing and crunching numbers? Wouldn't that be a gargantuan task?
Undoubtedly, Bo. Auditing would revert to being a wholly manual process that took weeks, if not months, to complete. Errors would likely skyrocket, and identifying discrepancies would become vastly more difficult.
And what about exchanging foreign currency? International travel could turn into a nightmare, with everyone carrying around stacks of notes.
I'm no expert in this, but wouldn't banks also face severe problems in maintaining the storage and security of physical currency?
Absolutely, Javier. Banks would have to step up their storage capabilities drastically. About your point, Bo, exchanging foreign currency would be a real hassle. It would also heighten the risk of counterfeiting and fraud since verifying physical currencies would be way more difficult than digital transactions.
I can see how countries with the most stable currencies, like the US or the UK, would have an advantage. Maybe in our techless world, currency stability would be the new superpower.
Talk about a drastic change. I'm beginning to appreciate credit cards more and more. What about our learning systems, guys? Does chalk and blackboard sound a bit nostalgic?
Ah, the good old days. Without digital technologies, classrooms would be very different indeed. We might even see a return to the Socratic method from ancient Greece, which emphasized dialogue and debate as a learning tool rather than memorizing and regurgitating information.
Here's a thought. Would the apprenticeship model make a comeback too? People learning hands-on from experienced practitioners in the field, instead of embarking on 4-year-long expensive degree programs.
That's a point worth discussing. Indeed, the lack of technology might push us towards that model. But how about research? You can't get past the fact there'd be no more quick Google searches to aid in your exploration.
Libraries filled with physical books would become the hub of research again. And I can't help but wonder, would we see a renaissance of primary research?
Bet we'd see more field trips. But haven't we been trying to move away from rote learning? Wouldn't we risk falling back into that trap?
That is a clear issue. Technology has allowed us to personalize each student's learning experience, accommodating different paces and learning styles which might get lost, not to mention those with special needs who benefit from the advances in tech-aided education. There's no denying, the elimination of technology would be a massive backward leap.
Are libraries going to be our new Google?
In a ways, yes. In a world without technology, we'd be heavily relying on physical repositories of information such as libraries. Getting quick answers to queries might be significantly slower. In place of Wikipedia, we'd have encyclopedias.
Imagine looking up things in an index and seeking out the information from books. Not as easy as typing in a search bar.
And not only that, the process of publication and dissemination of new knowledge would be incredibly slowed down. It's research papers to printed journals all over again.
Wouldn't that also affect the rate at which we innovate?
Absolutely. The process of learning would become much more time-consuming and laborious. Newer concepts might take a longer while to proliferate, hindering timely innovation.
It's also worth considering how teaching methods in classrooms would adapt. Perhaps a resurgence in focus on soft skills like communication, critical thinking, and creativity.
Wow, imagine teaching coding without a computer. Talk about reverting to the literal drawing board.
Definitely a challenge. But this could also bring forward the value of practical skills, hands-on experience, and observational learning. Technology's removal might just re-establish these fundamental aspects of our learning.
That's a valid point. It's all about adapting to the available resources and modifying our learning methods. We've done it in the past. We could do it again.
Now imagine a world without digital health records or telemedicine. Would doctors be able to handle the shift back to paper?
Well, I believe that without technology, we'd be going back to the good old days of handwritten patient files. It would be a logistical nightmare, especially for hospitals managing a large number of patients. The efficiency and precision that digital records provide would be sorely missed.
It surely is an age of instant access to everything. But thinking about it, wouldn't this shift bring back the importance of personal interaction between doctors and patients?
You have a point. If we think about traditional healing methods, it was all about the doctor-patient relationship. Detailed consultations, personal follow-ups, all these calls for better interaction.
Exactly. On the other hand, managing chronic conditions and emergency services could become more difficult without the use of technology. Imagine getting back to the days of house calls and emergency letters.
And don't forget about remote areas where telemedicine plays a vital role. It could be a huge setback for them.
Hence, it's not all negative. The role of human touch, understanding, and rapport in healing could be accentuated. However, it could pose an uphill battle for healthcare delivery, especially in remote areas and for chronic diseases. Thinking of wellness during pandemics? It's hard to imagine managing such situations without technology. What do you guys think?
Without digital tools like contact tracing, data visualization, and telecommunication, it would be an extremely uphill task. That's an understatement.
And how about those health monitoring apps? They really played a crucial role in times like these. With technology poof, there would be a lot more physical interactions, which can potentially increase the contagion.
Would this mean increased demand for healthcare professionals then?
I believe so. The role of doctors, nurses, and other healthcare providers would drastically increase, and so as not to overload them, we'd need more hands on deck.
That brings in a whole new picture of the job market. Might be a shift away from tech towards healthcare professionals and researchers.
And these professionals will have to get back to intuitive diagnosing, counting pulse with fingers, auscultation with stethoscope, personal interaction, more of human touch.
That's an excellent point, Javier. We've come to rely on technology so much that we almost forget how things were done in the past. But remember, those methods were far from perfect, and they had their own set of challenges.
True, John. Increased demand would also mean more training and education needed for these professionals. It would be a significant shift.
Imagine sitting by a radio. Unlike binge-watching Netflix series.
Not having technology, though. How do we catch up with new music or enjoy our favorite artist's music? I assume it's back to live shows.
And what's the music without a dance? Communities would find their own rhythm without choreographed online dance routines. The dance scene could transform completely.
Speaking of communities, board games might see a resurgence. Chess, poker, Monopoly, many more could regain popularity. They create strong bonds, you know.
I found these games often promote strategic thinking and problem-solving skills. But without access to digital games, would this impact the gaming industry as a whole? What do you think, John?
In a world without electronics, traditional games would likely become our main source of entertainment. They're not just fun, they're also social bonding experiences.
Yeah, not to downplay the importance of technology in our current entertainment scenario, but sometimes it does make one wonder if we have started missing out on some crucial, fundamental, real-world entertainment.
And theatres. Remember, before Netflix, theatres used to be our primary source of movies. We might see a resurgence of theatres in such settings.
That reminds me of the Shakespearean era. Live shows and dramas would become incredibly valuable for both information and entertainment. Imagine the resurgence of live sports as well.
Back to the basics, huh? Baseball games at the park, weekend picnics, outdoor activities.
That sounds nostalgic. The pace of life might slow down. Entertainment would be raw, social and simple, devoid of screens. A different world indeed.
Radical changes, yes. But I can't help but think we might lose something in the process. The fast-paced digital news, instant communication, the constant knowledge at our fingertips. That's hard to replace.
Indeed. And who's to say some forms of digital entertainment doesn't warrant their own critical thinking and social bonding? Video games, for instance, can create meaningful friendships and experiences as well.
Think about content creation. No more Photoshop, Illustrator, or Final Cut Pro. We'd be back to physical design boards and old-school film editing machines.
Physical media, huh? Newspapers, magazines, records. It would drastically change the landscape of the entertainment industry. Imagine advertising campaigns without digital support.
From a financial perspective, the expenditure for these physical materials would skyrocket. Ad revenue might plummet without targeted online ads. It could be a considerable financial load for small-scale content creators.
But on the bright side, wouldn't it push for more creativity? Since resources become limited, it would be all about maximizing what's at hand.
True. But remember our discussion on how online media has democratized content creation? Anyone with a smartphone can become a content creator. Without technology, it could limit individuals from expressing their creativity.
Not just limit, it could potentially create a larger divide between the professionals and amateurs. The barriers to entry would likely increase.
Why do you think so, John?
Because traditional forms of media production require more expertise and equipment compared to digital. It would prevent a lot of people from testing the waters, so to speak, and experimenting with new ideas.
So, it's the challenge of balancing creativity with accessibility then. On one hand, we want to encourage a world full of diverse voices, but on the other hand, it's equally important to craft high-quality, captivating content that resonates with the audience.
What about personal data security if we remove technology from the equation?
In some way, it might simplify the picture. Remember, most data breaches happen because of technological vulnerabilities. If we remove tech, then perhaps we reduce the risk of such leaks.
But there will still be a possibility of data breach, right? Paper records can be stolen, for instance.
Yes, it won't eliminate the problem entirely, but the scale could drastically decrease. However, we will have to find new ways to safeguard our data in physical forms, a challenge in itself.
I imagine the old days, where important documents were kept in vaults with numerous locks. Maybe locksmiths would flourish again.
Interesting point, Javier. But I'm wondering about something else. Wouldn't the lack of technology also mean that we would have less personal data accumulated? Since we aren't constantly online, there would be fewer digital footprints.
That's partially correct, Bo. But remember, any information related to us is personal data. So even things like paper medical records or library transactions will still create footprints.
True, and those are just as vital to safeguard. It's not just about technology, it's about protection of our personal identity and information.
It seems whether technology is present or not, data security is a matter of concern. In this techless economy we're imagining, different challenges would come up requiring unique solutions.
Absolutely. These conversations always lead back to some fundamental principles: human creativity, adaptability, and the yearn for security.
Imagine diplomacy without technology, or maintaining long-distance relationships.
Yes, it's overwhelming to envision a world where international diplomacy mechanically grinds. In reality, current global politics heavily relies on instant communication for negotiations, decision-making, and crisis management.
Getting real-time updates and quick data access helps us make informed decisions. Without it, would we be slower to respond?
The answer is most likely yes. With slower information traffic, we might suffer delayed decision-making, which could cause issues especially during times of global crisis.
Could you explain how we'd communicate without digital technology?
Think traditional. We'd have to rely on physical letters, international postage systems, and telegrams.
Telegrams. Aren't they known to be succinct? How would this impact the context of communication?
Context is crucial in diplomacy. With telegrams, it's confined to brevity, making it difficult to convey intricate details, let alone nuance. Misunderstandings could arise.
What about personal relationships? Waiting weeks for a letter from a loved one sounds agonizing.
I agree. Imagine losing the comfort of instant communication. No video calls, text messages, or even emails.
Precisely. The human touch could suffer. But on the flip side, maybe there's a chance for anticipation in waiting for letters. Simultaneously, there'll be an increase in human connection.
You guys ever thought about superheroes in a techless world?
Interesting. What about Iron Man without his tech-savvy suit?
Huh? Iron Man would probably just be, well, Tony Stark.
He'd have to rely on physical strength, agility, and natural human resilience. He wouldn't be invincible anymore.
What about the villains then? Think of all the tech-dependent arch-enemies. Aren't they rendered powerless?
Precisely, Bo. We'd revert to villains using purely physical or psychological means. Public enemies relying on old-school muscle without tech to aid their scheming.
I'd like to see a rebooted Joker without tech toys, just reveling in his trickery and crude but clever contraptions.
But here's a twist. Technological advances sometimes give superheroes their uncanny abilities. Without those, some might not even exist.
Like who? Can you give an example?
RoboCop springs to mind. He's an entire product of advanced technology. Without tech, he's simply Officer Alex Murphy.
Could be a fresh challenge for comic creators to reinvent characters reliant on natural strengths, outsmarting villains with their cognition, leadership, and resilience against odds.
A real callback to the human essence of our superhero stories. That could be wildly popular.
Maybe we're onto something. How about we invite our listeners to put on their creative hats and come up with their own non-tech-dependent superheroes?